He smashed her flower shop in anger until he discovered she was the woman who saved his mother. The first thing that shattered was a hand-painted ceramic vase filled with white gardenias. It did not slip. It did not fall. It was swept off the counter by the arm of a man who had never once been taught that his anger had consequences. The vase exploded against the tile floor, scattering soil and petals and broken pieces across the entrance like evidence of something irreversible. Then a second vase followed. Then a third. Then an entire row of glass containers toppled one after another, crashing in a cascade of destruction that seemed to feed on itself. Water spread across the floor in dark pools. Roses bent and broke under careless feet. Lilies were crushed into the tile. A bucket of freshly cut peonies tipped sideways and spilled its contents like something bleeding out. By the time Damien Cross turned to leave, half the interior of Bloom and Petal looked like a storm had torn through it. Petals floated in puddles of dirty water. Shards of glass glittered under the morning light. The air smelled of crushed stems and spilled soil and something else, something that felt like the end of a very long story. And through all of it, the woman behind the counter said nothing. She stood perfectly still with both hands pressed flat against the wooden surface, watching him with an expression that was not anger. It was not even hurt. It was something quieter than both of those things. Something that suggested she had already made peace with losses far greater than this one. That silence unnerved Damien more than any scream ever could have. Have you ever been so blinded by your own frustration that you destroyed the one thing you should have protected? Have you ever let your worst impulses win and then had to live with what came next? Have you ever broken something that could not be unbroken? If you have, then you already know where this story is going. But what you do not know yet is the twist that changes everything. Because the woman standing in that destroyed flower shop, the woman whose life's work now lay in ruins at her feet, she was not a stranger to Damien Cross. She was the person who had saved the life of the one human being he loved most in the world. He just did not know it yet. If you have ever made a mistake you cannot take back, hit that like button right now. Because this story is about redemption. It is about the kind of grace that we do not deserve but sometimes receive anyway. And I promise you, the twist coming will leave you absolutely speechless. So stay with me until the end. You will be glad you did. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you the man Damien Cross was before that morning in the flower shop. Let me show you how a person becomes capable of such casual destruction. Because nobody is born cruel. Cruelty is built one choice at a time. Damien Cross was 41 years old, and he had spent the last 2 decades reshaping the skyline of every city he touched. He did not simply buy buildings. He replaced entire neighborhoods. Historic theaters became luxury condominiums. Family-owned restaurants that had served the same community for generations became high-end retail spaces. Corner stores where children had bought candy for 50 years became lobbies with his company's name etched into marble walls. People in the business world called him relentless. His board of directors called him visionary. The newspapers called him a titan of industry and a master of acquisition. Nobody called him kind. He had never given them reason to. The Phoenix Gateway project was supposed to be his masterpiece, a $1.2 billion mixed-use development that would transform the city's neglected waterfront district into a gleaming showcase of modern architecture. Premium residential towers, high-end retail, restaurant spaces that would attract celebrity chefs from around the world. The project had been 6 years in the planning and 3 years in the acquisition phase. Every property on the waterfront had been purchased. Every permit had been secured. Every stakeholder had been satisfied, except one. Bloom and Petal sat wedged between 2 aging brick buildings at the corner of Harbor Street and Vine, directly in the center of the planned development. It was a small flower shop with a hand-painted sign above the door and window boxes overflowing with seasonal color. The building itself was narrow and old, the kind of structure that real estate developers usually acquired without difficulty because the owners were always ready to retire or relocate or simply cash out. Damien had sent 5 offer letters before he ever set foot inside the place. The first offer was generous, double the market value for a building in that condition. The second offer was extraordinary, 4 times what the property was worth. The third, fourth, and fifth offers climbed higher still, reaching numbers that would have set any reasonable person up comfortably for the rest of their life. Each time, the response was the same. A polite, handwritten note on cream-colored stationery, thanking him for his interest and explaining that the shop was not available for purchase. No counteroffer, No negotiation, no lawyer's letter demanding better terms, just a simple, quiet refusal. His attorneys had been clear. Construction could not begin until that parcel was secured. The footprint of the development required that corner. Every week of delay cost his investors real money. Every month that passed without resolution made him look weak, ineffective, incapable of closing a simple acquisition. And so Damien decided he would handle the matter personally, because in his experience, obstacles that resisted him simply had not yet been confronted directly enough. Everything had a price. Everyone could be bought. He had built his entire career on that belief, and it had never failed him. He would walk into that flower shop, meet the owner face to face, and make her understand that resistance was pointless. He would offer her whatever number finally made sense to her, shake her hand, and walk out with a signed contract. Simple, clean, efficient, the same way he handled every problem. He had no idea that he was about to meet someone who operated by entirely different rules, someone for whom money was not the measure of value, someone who had already decided what she was willing to lose and what she would protect at any cost, someone who would ultimately save his mother's life without ever expecting him to know. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let me first tell you about Iris Morgan, the woman who owned Bloom and Petal, because to understand what Damien destroyed that morning, you have to understand what that shop truly meant. Iris Morgan was 36 years old, and she had been running Bloom and Petal for exactly 8 years, 3 months, and 14 days. She knew the count precisely because she had taken over the shop on the morning of her grandmother's funeral. The doors had opened at 7 in the morning, just as they always had, because Elena Morgan had made her granddaughter promise that the shop would never close. Not for grief, not for hardship, not for anything. This place is more than walls and windows, Elena had said in those final weeks when her voice was barely a whisper and her hands could no longer arrange the flowers she loved. This place is every person who ever smiled here, every love declared across this counter, every grief honored with a proper arrangement, every moment of beauty we gave to people who needed it. Protect it, Iris. Promise me you will protect it. Iris had promised, and she had kept that promise through 8 years of financial struggle, through months when the shop barely broke even, through seasons when she had to choose between repairing the ancient heating system and buying inventory. She had kept the promise through 2 economic recessions and a pandemic that nearly ended her. She had kept the promise when every rational calculation said she should sell, take the money, start fresh somewhere else. The shop was not logical. It was not practical. It was not a sound business decision. It was the only thing she had left of the woman who raised her. Iris had grown up in the back room of Bloom and Petal, doing homework at the work table, while her grandmother filled orders for weddings and funerals in hospital rooms. She had learned the language of flowers before she learned algebra. Red roses for passion, white lilies for sympathy, yellow tulips for cheerful affection, forget-me-nots for true love that endures beyond death. Her grandmother had taught her that flowers were not decorations. They were messages. They were the things people could not say with words but still needed to express. They were hope made visible, grief made bearable, love made tangible. Every morning, Iris opened the shop at dawn. She arranged the window displays with the same care her grandmother had shown. She greeted the regular customers by name. She remembered their anniversaries and their losses and their children's graduations. She was not running a business. She was tending a living memorial. And when the offer letters arrived from Cross Development Corporation, she read each one carefully, set them aside, and wrote her polite refusals on the same cream-colored stationery her grandmother had always used. She knew who Damien Cross was. Everyone in the city knew who Damien Cross was. She knew the offer amounts were extraordinary, life-changing, more money than she would ever earn from selling flowers. She knew that refusing was irrational by any conventional measure. She also knew that some things cannot be measured conventionally. Some things are worth more than their price. So when Damien Cross walked through her door that morning, Iris was not surprised. She had known he would come eventually. Men like him always came eventually. They believed that personal pressure could accomplish what written offers could not. They believed that looking someone in the eye made resistance impossible. They did not understand that some people had already decided what they were willing to die for. Damien pushed open the wooden door of Bloom and Petal at 8:15 in the morning on a Tuesday in late October. The autumn light came through the windows at long, warm angles, catching dust motes floating above buckets of fresh-cut flowers. The smell hit him immediately, overwhelming in a way that felt almost physical. Green and sweet, and impossibly alive, For just a moment, standing in that doorway, something in his chest loosened slightly. An old memory tried to surface, something about a woman's hands arranging flowers in a kitchen window, something about being young and small and watching those hands move with such gentle precision. He pushed the memory down. He was not here for nostalgia. He was here to close a deal. Iris stood behind the counter, wrapping a bouquet of autumn chrysanthemums for a customer. She was younger than he expected. Dark hair pulled back from a face that held no obvious tension. Calm, steady eyes that met his briefly and then returned to her work without apparent concern. He waited while she finished the transaction, watching her hands move with practiced efficiency. When the customer left, she turned to face him fully. "You must be Mr. Cross," she said. Her voice was neither warm nor cold, simply factual. "Miss Morgan." He stepped forward, reaching into his jacket for the folder he had prepared. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I did not agree to a meeting. You simply walked in." "Fair enough." He set the folder on the counter and slid it toward her. "Then let me make this brief. I understand you have received our previous offers. I am here to tell you personally that those numbers were starting points. Whatever figure makes sense to you, I will match it. I simply need this matter resolved." Iris looked at the folder, but did not open it. Then she looked back at him. "Mr. Cross, I have read every offer your company sent. They were generous. They were more than generous. And I appreciate that you took the time to come here personally." She paused. "But this shop is not for sale. Not at any price." Damien felt his practiced patience flicker. "Everything has a price, Miss Morgan. That is simply how the world works. Not this. Not to me." He leaned forward slightly, letting his voice carry the weight of absolute certainty. "Let me be direct with you. The Phoenix Gateway project represents more than $1 billion in investment. It will create thousands of jobs. It will revitalize an entire district of this city. And right now, it is being held up by a single property that cannot possibly be worth what you are sacrificing to keep it." Iris folded her arms across her chest, a gesture that was not defensive but simply settled. "My grandmother built this shop in 1961. She gave 40 years of her life to it. Raised me in that back room. She taught me everything I know about beauty and kindness and what it means to give people something that matters." She paused, and her voice dropped slightly. "She died in the apartment upstairs, in the same bed she had slept in for 50 years, looking out the window at the street she loved. This is not a transaction for me, Mr. Cross. This is the only thing I have left of her." Damien felt something twist in his chest, something that might have been recognition, something that might have been memory. He pushed it down harder. "Your grandmother is gone," he said, and even as he said it, he knew how cold it sounded. "The building is old. The neighborhood is changing whether you want it to or not. I am offering you the chance to walk away with enough money to build something new anywhere you want, to start fresh, to create your own legacy instead of living in someone else's." Iris was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but absolutely unwavering. "I do not want something new, Mr. Cross. I want this." Something in Damien broke loose then. It was not one feeling. It was several months of frustration colliding at once. He thought about the investors waiting for updates, the contractors on hold, the permits with deadlines that were already slipping. He thought about every board meeting where he had promised this would be resolved, every phone call where he had assured people that one stubborn shop owner would not derail a billion-dollar project. He thought about his reputation, his legacy, everything he had spent his life building. And he thought about this woman standing calmly in front of him, unmoved by numbers that would have made anyone else weep with gratitude, refusing to bend, refusing to break, refusing to do the simple logical thing that everyone else in her position would have done. The rage came up fast and hot, and before he fully decided to do it, his arm swept across the display shelf beside the counter. The first vase hit the floor and exploded. Then everything else followed. Ceramic pots crashed against tile. Glass shattered in cascading waves. Water spread across the floor, mingling with soil and crushed petals. He kept going, moving through the shop like something unleashed, knocking over bucket arrangements and toppling display stands and sending flower after flower to the wet, ruined ground. By the time he stopped, he was breathing hard. His hands were shaking. The shop looked like something had died in it. And Iris Morgan had not moved. She had not screamed. She had not tried to stop him. She had not called for help. or threatened to call the police, or done any of the things a normal person would have done. She simply watched him, and then slowly she knelt down in the wreckage. She picked up one flower at a time. A rose, a lily, a single white gardenia that had somehow survived intact. She set each one carefully aside, as if she was going to need them later, as if she still intended to open tomorrow morning, as if she had already decided that his destruction was temporary and her persistence was permanent. That silence, that terrible, patient silence, it unnerved him more than anything else possibly could have. Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out. He was in his car and 3 blocks away before his hands stopped shaking. He was on the highway heading back to his office before he realized that his chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. He had destroyed things before. Deals, competitors, old buildings that stood in the way of progress. He had never felt like this afterward. He did not yet know why, but he was about to find out. If you are still watching right now, I want you to drop a comment and tell me what you would have done if you were Iris. Would you have sold the shop and taken the money, or would you have protected it the way she did? I want to hear your thoughts because this story is really about what we choose to hold on to and what we are willing to let go. Let me know in the comments. Now let me take you to the other side of Damien's life, the side that no one in his business world ever saw, the side that contained the only person who had ever made him feel something other than ambition. 3 hours after he destroyed that flower shop, Damien Cross stood in a hospital corridor and felt the floor shift beneath him. The hospital smelled the way hospitals always smell, antiseptic and recycled air, and something underneath both of those things that suggested mortality. Damien had walked these corridors twice a week for the past 14 months. He knew the route by heart, past the reception desk, through the double doors, left at the nursing station, down the long hallway to the room at the end, room 417, where his mother was fighting for her life. Evelyn Cross was 68 years old. She had raised Damien alone after his father left when he was still a toddler. She had worked double shifts at a textile factory to keep food on the table. She had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities she never had. And she had watched him grow into a man whose success came with costs she never fully understood. She did not approve of everything her son had become. She told him so regularly, with the kind of direct honesty that only mothers can deliver. She saw through his armor. She remembered the boy he had been before the world taught him to be hard. And she loved him anyway. Completely. Unconditionally. The way only a mother can. 14 months ago, Evelyn had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that attacked her body's own systems with relentless efficiency. The doctors had been blunt from the beginning. Without a very specific medical procedure requiring an extraordinarily rare donor match, she would not survive more than 18 months. The matching requirements were impossibly narrow. Specific genetic markers, unusual blood type, tissue compatibility factors that ruled out 99.9% of the population. The odds of finding a random match were less than 1 in 47,000. Damien had paid for every specialist money could reach. He had flown in experts from 3 continents. He had his entire extended family tested. Cousins, second cousins, people he had not spoken to in decades. None of them were compatible. He put out a quiet call through medical networks, hospital volunteer programs, donor registries around the world. He offered financial incentives that would have made most people consider major surgery just for the payout. For 3 agonizing weeks, nothing came back. And then, when hope had contracted to almost nothing, the hospital called. A donor had been found. Anonymous. Perfect match. Against all odds, against all probability, someone in the city had the exact combination of factors required to save Evelyn Cross's life. The procedure was successful. Evelyn recovered steadily over the following weeks. The color returned to her face. Her strength returned to her limbs. The doctors spoke in cautious but optimistic terms about long-term prognosis. Damien had pressed his face into his hands in the hospital parking garage the day they got the news and allowed himself to come apart completely. Relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning. Gratitude so intense it had no words. His mother was going to live, and somewhere in the city, a stranger had made that possible. The donor had made one request above all others. Absolute anonymity. No contact from the patient or the patient's family. Legal protections that ensured their identity would never be disclosed. Evelyn talked about this person sometimes. Not obsessively, but with the specific tenderness of someone who had been handed their life back by a stranger. Someone decided I was worth saving, she would say, and they did not even stay to be thanked. What kind of person does that, Damien? What kind of person gives that much and asks for nothing? Damien had privately spent considerable effort trying to identify the donor. Hospital administrators, lawyers, private investigators, every channel available to him. He had come up empty each time. The donor's anonymity was ironclad. That Tuesday evening, 3 hours after destroying the flower shop, Damien arrived at the hospital later than usual. His mother was asleep when he entered the room. He sat in the chair beside her bed and tried not to think about what he had done that morning. He was not succeeding. The image of Iris Morgan kneeling on that wet tile floor kept returning to him with an insistence that felt almost physical. The way she had picked up those flowers one by one. The silence. The patience. The absolute refusal to be broken by what he had done to her. He had never felt guilt like this before. He was not even sure guilt was the right word. It was something deeper. Something that suggested the foundation of his entire life had developed a crack. A nurse came in quietly to update the medical chart on the desk beside the bed. She set down a folder and stepped out to speak with another staff member in the hallway. Damien glanced at the folder without meaning to. Medical paperwork did not interest him. He looked away. Then he looked back. Part of the folder had slipped open. He could see the header on the top document. Post-procedure donor follow-up. A routine administrative form clipped together with intake paperwork. And at the back of the stack, a photograph attached for identity verification purposes. Damien leaned forward. His heart was suddenly beating very fast, though he could not have explained why. He recognized her immediately. The dark hair, the calm expression, the face he had been watching kneel quietly on a flower shop floor not 4 hours earlier. Iris Morgan. Damien sat back in the chair so hard it scraped against the floor. His mother stirred slightly, then settled back into sleep. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he reached forward and pulled the folder closer. The document was a standard compatibility verification form from the hospital's rare donor registry. Iris Morgan had registered as a voluntary donor 2 years earlier during a community health screening event. When Evelyn Cross's case was flagged as critical, the hospital had run her profile against every potential match in their system. Against astronomical probability, Iris Morgan had matched perfectly. She had been contacted by the hospital's donor coordination team. She had agreed to the procedure within 24 hours. She had refused any form of compensation, financial assistance, medical expense coverage, even the modest stipend the hospital offered to cover time away from work. Her only condition, held to firmly and in writing, was that the patient and the patient's family never be told who she was. When the donor coordinator asked why she wanted anonymity, her answer had been recorded in the file notes. I do not need gratitude for helping someone live. I just need to know that I helped. Damien sat in that hospital room for a very long time after the nurse returned and took the folder away. He thought about his mother sleeping peacefully in that bed. He thought about the day they had gotten the call that a donor had been found. He thought about the weeks of recovery, the gradual return of hope, the miracle that had seemed to come from nowhere. He thought about the fact that somewhere across the city, while his mother was being prepped for the procedure that would save her life, a woman had been going through her own medical process. Blood draws, compatibility testing, the procedure itself, which was not minor, which required recovery time, which came with its own risks and discomforts. And then that woman had gone home to her flower shop and arranged flowers in the window the very next morning. She had returned to her life as if nothing extraordinary had happened, because for her it was not extraordinary. It was simply what you did when someone needed help and you were able to give it. He thought about the vases he had knocked off her counter. He thought about the way she had knelt on the floor and picked up the stems one by one. He thought about the fact that he had destroyed the life's work of the woman who had saved his mother. The guilt arrived slowly at first. Then, all at once. If this twist hit you as hard as it hit me, I need you to smash that subscribe button right now, because stories like this do not come around very often. And we are just getting to the best part. I promise you, what happens next will change the way you think about redemption, about forgiveness, about what it really means to make things right. So stay with me. Damien Cross had built a career on being the most decisive person in every room. He made fast decisions and he stood behind them. He did not second-guess himself. He did not explain his choices. He did not apologize for outcomes that others found difficult. These were not poses. They were deeply held beliefs about how strength worked and what it required. But sitting in that hospital room beside the woman whose life had been quietly saved by the same woman he had gone out of his way to humiliate, every conviction he had walked in with that morning felt thin and poorly made. He left the hospital without waking his mother. He got in his car and drove without destination, circling through city streets he did not see, his mind caught in an endless loop. The timeline crashed into his consciousness over and over again. 3 weeks ago, Iris Morgan had undergone a medical procedure that saved Evelyn Cross's life. 2 weeks ago, she had recovered enough to return to work. 4 days ago, she had sent him another polite refusal letter. And that morning, he had stood in her shop and destroyed everything she owned. He had not known. He had not known who she was or what she had done. But that ignorance did not excuse anything. It did not change what he had chosen to do when faced with someone who simply refused to be bought. He had looked at a woman tending her grandmother's legacy and decided she was nothing more than an obstacle. He had let his frustration become violence. He had walked away without looking back. And now he knew the truth. And he had to figure out what to do with it. Damien did not sleep that night. He lay in his penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling, seeing Iris's face every time he closed his eyes. The calm, the silence, the way she had knelt in the wreckage and begun picking up flowers as if his destruction was temporary and her persistence was permanent. What kind of person saves a stranger's life and asks for nothing in return? What kind of person gets their entire world destroyed and responds by quietly cleaning up? What kind of person was Iris Morgan? And what kind of person was he? By morning, Damien had made a decision. He did not know if it would fix anything. He did not know if fixing was even possible. But he knew that he could not continue living as the man who had done what he did without at least trying to make it right. He drove to Bloom and Petal as the sun came up. The shop was still damaged. The door was propped open to let in fresh air. Iris was inside, sweeping the last of the debris into neat piles. She had somehow salvaged enough flowers to fill a few buckets, which she had placed outside on the sidewalk with a hand-lettered sign that said, "Open despite circumstances." Damien stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching her work. She moved with the same efficiency he had noticed the day before. No wasted motion, no visible anger, just the steady progress of someone who had already decided to keep going regardless of how she felt. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. Iris looked up. Her expression did not change. She simply watched him approach with the same stillness she had shown the day before. "Mr. Cross," she said. "I did not expect to see you again so soon." He had prepared something on the drive over, a careful, measured explanation of what he had discovered, followed by a sincere apology, followed by a concrete offer to make things right. He was good at structured conversations. They kept him in control of outcomes. He lost the structure almost immediately. "I was at the hospital last night," he said. "My mother's hospital." He stopped, started again. There was a file, a donor file. "I saw your photograph." Iris set the broom against the wall. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she looked away toward the window, and he could see that she was working out how to respond. Not with shock, but with something that looked more like resignation, like she had known on some level that this conversation would eventually find her. "I was not supposed to see it," Damien said. "It was an accident. But I need you to know. I need you to understand that I know what you did. And I know what I did yesterday, and those two things do not fit together in any way that makes me look like anything other than exactly what I was." Iris folded her arms loosely across her chest. "You did not know," she said. "That does not fix it." "No." She nodded slowly. "It does not." Damien took a breath. "I came here to tell you that I will rebuild this shop. Every repair, every replacement, every stem and pot and display case. I will pay beyond what the damage warranted, and the development, Phoenix Gateway, I will find a way to redesign it. I do not know how yet, but I will make the project work without requiring you to leave. I will not take this place from you." Iris listened to all of it without expression. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was soft but absolutely clear. "I do not want your money, Mr. Cross." He started to respond. She held up one hand. "I saved your mother because someone needed saving. I did not do it because of who she was. I did not even know who she was at the time. I just knew that she needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That is the only reason." She paused. "And what you did yesterday was wrong." Deeply wrong. But I do not need it compensated. I do not need your guilt turned into a transaction. I just need you to leave this place alone." Damien felt something crack open in his chest. He was not used to conversations he could not control. He was not used to people who could not be bought or bargained with or manipulated into more convenient positions. "Then what do you need?" he asked. "Tell me what would make this right. Tell me what I can do." Iris looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried something that might have been pity, or might have been exhaustion, or might have been something else entirely. "Figure out who you want to be, Mr. Cross. Then become that person. Not for me. For yourself. For the next person who stands in your way. For everyone who has to deal with the man you choose to be from this moment forward." She picked up her broom again. "That is what you can do. That is the only thing that would make any difference." Damien left the shop without another word. But this time, something fundamental had shifted. He could feel it in his chest, in his hands, in the way his thoughts moved. Something that had been locked for a very long time was now open, and he did not know yet what would come through. The next morning, Damien called an emergency meeting of his development team and told them that the Phoenix Gateway project was being redesigned. The Bloom and Petal parcel was no longer part of the acquisition. The design would have to be reworked around it. His chief architect stared at him. "Around it," he repeated. "You want to build $1 billion development around a flower shop. I want to build it around what matters." The financial implications were severe. $40 million in redesign costs, an 8-month construction delay, investor lawsuits, board resistance. His attorneys lined up to explain why this was professional suicide. Damien listened to all of it. Then he said, "I will cover the costs personally. This is non-negotiable." Over the following weeks, he hired restoration specialists to rebuild Bloom and Petal exactly as it had been. Vintage materials were sourced to match the original construction. The floor plan was replicated precisely. Every detail of Elena Morgan's original vision was researched and restored. He did all of this anonymously, through intermediaries, without ever contacting Iris directly. He respected her boundary. He understood that she did not want his presence, or his explanations, or his attempts at redemption. She wanted him to change. That was all. So he changed. Or rather, he began the long process of changing. He visited his mother in the hospital and told her the full story. Not the version that made him look acceptable. The real version, the destruction, the discovery, the shame. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You cannot fix what you broke, Damien," she said finally. "You cannot undo it, but you can build something new from the pieces. You can become someone different. Someone who would not have done what you did." She reached out and took his hand. "That is what matters now. Not the guilt, not the compensation, just the becoming." 6 months passed. Phoenix Gateway rose on the waterfront, but differently than originally planned. The towers were exactly as grand as the original designs. The retail spaces were filled with high-end tenants. The residential units commanded premium prices. But at the center of the development, where the plaza opened onto the harbor, stood one small building with a hand-painted sign and window boxes overflowing with seasonal color. The architects had redesigned the entire courtyard layout to draw foot traffic past the shop's entrance. The plaza literally curved around it. Architectural critics called the design radical. They called it surprisingly human. They called it a statement about preservation and progress existing in dialogue rather than opposition. Damien never explained why. He simply showed up at the construction site late at night, watching the shop being rebuilt board by board, and then went home without speaking to anyone. Opening day arrived on a clear morning in early spring. The plaza was filled with people, media, city officials, investors celebrating the completion of the largest waterfront development in the city's history. Damien moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations he did not feel he had earned. And then his mother arrived. Evelyn walked slowly through the plaza on her son's arm. She had recovered fully from her procedure. Her color was good. Her strength had returned, but she moved with the deliberate care of someone who understood that every day was a gift. She wanted to see the flower shop. She had heard about it from the news coverage. She wanted to meet the woman who had refused to sell, whose stubbornness had forced her son to build his masterpiece in a different shape. Damien had told her a version of the story. Not all of it. Not yet. but enough that she understood who Iris was before she walked through the door. They entered Bloom and Petal together. The shop was exactly as it had been before the destruction. The same layout, the same light coming through the windows, the same smell of green and sweet and alive. But there was something new on the restored wall behind the counter. A framed photograph, a younger woman with kind eyes and flower-dusted hands, standing in front of Bloom and Petal in what looked like the 1970s. She was smiling at the camera with the unmistakable warmth of someone who loved exactly where she was. Evelyn stopped walking. She stared at the photograph with an expression that Damien had never seen on her face before. Shock, recognition, something that looked almost like reverence. "Elena," she whispered. Iris turned from behind the counter. She had been arranging a display of spring tulips. Her hands went still. "You knew my grandmother," Iris said. It was not a question. Evelyn moved closer to the photograph. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached up toward the frame, without quite touching it. 1978, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I was 23 years old, newly divorced. I had a 2-year-old son and no money and nowhere to go. I spent 3 weeks sleeping in shelters, trying to figure out how to survive. She paused. Her eyes were wet. One afternoon in February, I collapsed on a sidewalk. I had not eaten in 2 days. I was so cold, I could not feel my hands. And a woman found me. A woman who owned a flower shop on Harbor Street. Damien felt something shift in his chest. A door opening onto a room he had never known existed. She brought me inside, Evelyn continued. She fed me soup and bread. She let me rest in the back room until I was strong enough to stand. She gave me money for food, even though she clearly did not have much herself. She helped me find information about housing assistance, about programs that could help me get back on my feet. Evelyn finally looked at Iris. I was ashamed, she said. I was so ashamed of where I had ended up that I never went back. I never thanked her properly, but I never forgot her. Not for 1 day in 45 years. Iris was very still. Her eyes were bright with tears that had not yet fallen. She never told me that story, Iris said. She never mentioned it. Evelyn nodded slowly. That was who she was. She helped people and let it go. She did not keep score. She did not expect anything back. She just planted seeds wherever she could and trusted that they would grow. Damien looked at his mother, then at Iris, then at the photograph of Elena Morgan smiling from the wall. The pieces of the story were falling into place now. A pattern that stretched back decades, connecting women he had never known in ways he was only beginning to understand. His mother's life had been saved twice. Once by Elena Morgan in 1978, and once by Elena's granddaughter 45 years later. The same family, the same shop, the same impulse toward kindness that asked nothing in return. Iris came around the counter. She took Evelyn's hands in her own. Your son figured it out, she said, about me being your donor. He came here after he found out. He wanted to make things right. Evelyn looked at her son. Her expression held something complicated. Pride, sorrow, hope. He told me what he did to this place, Evelyn said. He told me everything. Iris nodded. He did do that, and it was wrong, but he also rebuilt it, every detail. He made sure it was exactly as it had been, and he changed his entire development to protect it. She paused. I do not know if that makes up for what he did. I do not think I am the one who gets to decide that, but I know that your mother did something for you a very long time ago that she never asked to be repaid. And I know that somehow, without either of us planning it, I was able to do something for her in return. Evelyn's tears were falling freely now. Kindness circles back, she whispered. That is what your grandmother told me the day I left this shop. She said, what goes around comes around, dear. Just trust the process. Iris smiled. A real smile, the first Damien had seen from her. She used to say that to me too, Iris said. Every single day. Kindness circles back, even when you cannot see how, even when it takes years. Even when you have forgotten you planted the seed in the first place. The three of them stood there in that flower shop, surrounded by the smell of fresh blooms and the light of a spring morning, and the weight of a story that stretched back further than any of them had known. Damien felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for so long he had forgotten what breathing freely felt like. He had destroyed this place. He had hurt this woman. And she had saved his mother anyway, not knowing, not caring, simply because it was what needed to be done. He did not deserve the grace he had been given. But maybe that was the point. Maybe grace was never something you deserved. Maybe it was something you received and then spent the rest of your life trying to be worthy of. What happens now? He asked. Iris looked at him. The anger was gone from her eyes. Something else had taken its place. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. You keep becoming better, she said. That is what happens now. You keep trying. You keep growing. You keep planting seeds you might never see bloom. And maybe, if you are very fortunate, you end up being part of a story that is bigger than yourself. She turned back to her work. Now, would either of you like to buy some flowers? I am trying to run a business here. Evelyn laughed. It was a sound Damien had not heard from his mother in a very long time. Genuine joy. Unguarded relief. Give me everything in the window, Evelyn said. I want to fill my entire apartment. I want to wake up every morning surrounded by beauty. Iris smiled. Coming right up, Damien watched them interact. His mother and the woman whose grandmother had saved her life. The woman who had saved her life again without ever asking to be known. Two strangers connected across decades by acts of kindness that neither of them had ever expected to be repaid. He thought about everything he had built. The towers, the deals, the empire with his name on it. All of it felt smaller now, thinner, less important than he had always believed. And this flower shop, this tiny, stubborn, beautiful space that refused to be moved. It felt like the most significant thing he had ever been part of. He stepped outside onto the plaza. The morning sun was warm on his face. People moved through the waterfront district, laughing, taking photographs, enjoying the spaces he had created. But his eyes kept returning to the flower shop, the hand-painted sign, the window boxes overflowing with color, the small wooden door propped open to welcome anyone who needed beauty or comfort or hope. His mother emerged a few minutes later, carrying an enormous bouquet. Her face was radiant. She paused beside him. You did something good here, Damien, she said quietly. I know what it cost you. I know how hard it was to change. But you did it. You became someone different. Damien looked at her. Is that enough? He asked. Does that make up for what I did? Evelyn considered the question. Making up for things is not how life works, she said. You cannot balance the scales. You cannot undo the past, but you can become someone who would not repeat it. And then you can spend the rest of your days planting seeds of kindness wherever you go. She smiled at him. That is what Elena did. That is what her granddaughter does. That is what you can learn to do too. Damien looked back at the flower shop. Through the window he could see Iris arranging flowers in the display, moving with the same calm efficiency she always showed, building something beautiful out of ordinary materials. He thought about his grandmother, a woman he had never met, a woman who had saved his mother's life 45 years ago and never asked for credit. He thought about Iris, a woman who had saved his mother's life again and refused to be thanked. He thought about the chain of kindness stretching back through decades. Small acts of generosity that rippled forward through time, touching lives in ways their originators never knew. And he thought about himself, about the man he had been, about the man he was becoming, about the man he wanted to be. We cannot undo our worst moments. That was the truth. But we can choose what we build from the wreckage. We can decide who we become next. We can plant seeds that will bloom long after we are gone. Sometimes, if we are very fortunate, we discover that the person we hurt most was connected to us in ways we never imagined. Sometimes the woman whose life we destroyed was the woman who saved the life we loved most. Sometimes kindness circles back, even when we do not deserve it. Especially then. This is the story of Damien Cross and Iris Morgan. But it is also the story of Evelyn Cross and Elena Morgan. And the stories are connected. They were always connected. They were part of one long story about grace and generosity and the way small acts of love ripple forward through time. If this story moved you, I want you to do something for me. Share it with someone who needs to remember that our actions echo further than we know. Share it with someone who needs to believe that kindness matters even when no one is watching. Share it with someone who needs hope. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. This is what we do here. We tell stories that matter. Stories that make you think. Stories that remind you what is possible. More stories are waiting for you. Stay with me. The best is yet to come.